I never thought this day would come. You know, it's funny how life works out. One moment you're indispensable, a loyal soldier doing the grind every day, and then the next, you're out on the street wondering where everything went wrong. That's what happened to me when my boss's daughter, Rachel, took over the business. She didn't know it, but her decision to fire me was the beginning of her downfall. But let me backtrack. I'm Stanley, and I've spent the last 15 years at Jackson Enterprises. It wasn't just a job to me, it was home. I started working there as a young man, straight out of college. Mr. Jackson, the owner of the company, took me under his wing. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. Over the years, I built my career from the ground up, from intern to senior manager, and eventually I was trusted with leading major projects. There was one thing I was especially proud of, how Mr. Jackson always said I was like family to him. He had no sons, and he often said, "Stanley, you're the closest thing I have to a son." I'd grown close to him, and his daughter Rachel too. I remember when she was just a kid running around the office, long before she joined the company. I watched her grow up, and eventually I mentored her as she took on more responsibilities in the business. But everything changed the day I got the call. Mr. Jackson had passed away. It was sudden, unexpected, and hit everyone like a freight train. He had been a titan in the industry, and his death left a hole in the company and in all of our lives. I thought that after everything I'd be the one to take over his role. After all, I'd been by his side for years, working tirelessly to grow the company. But Rachel had a different plan. The day she stepped into her father's office for the first time as the new CEO, I could already feel the tension in the air. She was cold, nothing like the playful young woman I'd mentored. Her demeanor was sharp, businesslike, almost too calculated. Gone were the days of the fun corporate culture we'd built under Mr. Jackson. She had a different vision. She called me into her office one afternoon, and I could feel the weight of her stare. It wasn't the usual warmth I'd grown accustomed to over the years. There was a chill to her eyes, a glint of something unrecognizable. "Stanley, I'm going to make some changes around here," she said, tapping her fingers on the desk. "The company's future depends on adapting. You've been a great employee, but, well, you're just not a fit for the new direction I'm taking." And just like that, after 15 years of loyalty, hard work and sacrifice, she fired me. No warning, no thank you for everything I'd done. "You're out, Stanley," she said, her voice steady but void of any empathy. "Consider this a fresh start for both of us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought maybe I'd misunderstood. "Rachel, you can't be serious. I've given everything to this company. You've got to be joking, right?" My voice was shaking, but I tried to keep my composure, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not joking, Stanley. You're not the future of this company. You're too stuck in the past." The word stung. More than anything, I couldn't believe this was happening. I had spent years, helped build the empire her father left behind, and now this. She had the power, and she was using it ruthlessly. As I left her office that day, the weight of humiliation sat heavy in my chest. The place that had once felt like home now felt like a prison. My entire career was crumbling in front of my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I remember driving home that day, my mind racing. Was this how it ended? Everything I'd worked for? Everything I had given up? The betrayal stung deep. Rachel had always been like a younger sister to me. I watched her stumble through her early years at the company, then grow into the position she had now. It was hard to reconcile the girl I'd known with the cold, calculated woman who had just fired me. The pain was suffocating. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that I'd been betrayed by someone I cared about, or the crushing realization that the business I'd poured my life into was no longer mine. But the thing about betrayal is that it stirs something in you. It ignites a fire, a burning desire for justice. I couldn't let this slide. I had to do something. But what? That night, after I'd sat in silence for hours, something unexpected happened. I remembered a conversation I'd had with Mr. Jackson years ago. It was a casual chat, one of many over the years, but something he said suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. He had been talking about how corporate politics worked, about how people would do anything to get ahead, even betray those closest to them. And then he dropped this line: "If anything ever happens to me, Stanley, there's something you should know, something that could change everything." I couldn't remember the rest of the conversation clearly, but I remembered that one detail. Mr. Jackson had mentioned a document, a contingency plan, something to protect the company from people like Rachel. I didn't know what it was or where it was, but I knew it was out there, and suddenly everything shifted. I had a plan. Rachel thought she could just push me aside, fire me, and walk away without consequences. But she didn't know what her father had left behind. What she didn't know could very well bring her whole empire down. You know that feeling when the wind shifts, just enough to tell you that a storm's coming? That's what I felt the moment I remembered what Mr. Jackson once told me in passing. If anything ever happens to me, there's a folder only someone like you would know how to find. At the time I'd brushed it off, thought it was just an old man rambling about retirement plans or company policy. But now, after everything Rachel did, firing me like I was a disease to be purged, it clicked. He was talking about something real, something important, and maybe something dangerous. That night I couldn't sleep. The anger was still there, sure, but it had transformed. It wasn't just rage anymore, it was direction. I had a mission now. I lay on my couch, the dim glow from the streetlight bleeding through the blinds. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't want to read, former co-workers offering pity or worse, silence. But my mind was somewhere else. Back in the office, in that corner hallway only a few people ever went down, Mr. Jackson's private filing room. He called it the crypt. There were rumors about confidential documents, hidden deals, insurance policies he kept off the books. But no one dared to pry. Not back then. Now, I had nothing to lose. 2 nights later, I parked behind the office at 2:14 a.m., dressed in black and carrying an old employee badge that miraculously hadn't been deactivated yet. The building was mostly dark, except for Rachel's new floor. She'd had it renovated, glass walls, neon art, probably to prove she was modernizing the company. I took the stairs, every step echoing with memories. Back in the day, this place felt like home. Late-night project deadlines, early morning coffee with Jackson, celebrating company wins with people I considered family. Rachel had turned it into a cold empire overnight. I bypassed the main server room and slipped down the hallway to the back. The crypt was still there. Same dull metal door, same keypad lock. I remembered the code like muscle memory, 20157, the year he made me senior advisor, the month of his heart attack. Click. The lock hissed open. Inside was dust, filing, cabinets, and silence. I started digging. For 2 hours I combed through drawer after drawer, financial reports, personal memos, copies of contracts signed before Rachel even graduated college, and then, hidden beneath an old leather-bound ledger, I found a small black envelope labeled "In the event of succession." My heart thudded as I opened it. Inside was a USB drive, unlabeled, no note, just that, and I see a hand-drawn floor map of the original building before Rachel's renovation, circled in red ink. Server Vault B2. That server room was demolished years ago, or so we thought. The next morning I drove to the only person I could trust from the old days, Leon, our former IT guy, retired 2 years ago. Brilliant, paranoid, the kind of guy who still used burner phones. When I showed him the USB, he stared at it like I'd handed him nuclear codes. "Where'd you get this, Stanley?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "From Jackson, sort of," I replied. Leon plugged it into his offline laptop. It blinked, processed. then spat out a single document. Project Keystone. It was encrypted heavily. Leon leaned back. "This ain't a joke. Jackson paid a lot of money to keep this buried." "What is it?" I asked. He gave me a look. "Can't say yet, but if Rachel knew this existed, she'd burn the building to the ground." Later that week, Rachel made her next move. She ordered all legacy documents destroyed, anything predating her takeover. She fired 2 more senior staff, installed cameras on every hallway, and she sent out an internal memo. No former employees are allowed on company premises without written permission. She knew, maybe not exactly what I was doing, but she knew someone was digging. That same night, I snuck back in. Not through the front, through the parking garage, where Leon once installed a bypass port behind an old vending machine for maintenance. It still worked. I crept back to the sub-level blueprints and found what used to be Server Vault B2. Except now, it was behind a wall of fake paneling, hidden behind the new staff gym. I pried it open, dust, wires, darkness. But behind it, I found something chilling. A locked cabinet, and inside a folder stamped with Rachel's name. Not her signature, a contract, one that directly linked her to off-book investments made through shell companies months before her father's death, transactions that bled the company dry, accounts in the Caymans, private jets, even a fake acquisition proposal that funneled $2.3 million into a consulting firm registered under a fake name, an alias she used in college. It wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. My hands shook, not from fear, from opportunity. Rachel didn't just fire me. She inherited a company under false pretenses and had been stealing from it before her father even passed. And now, I had proof. But I wasn't done yet. As I stepped back into the hallway to leave, I heard something. Click. I turned. Rachel, standing at the far end of the corridor, wearing a trench coat, holding a flashlight, her face pale, expression unreadable. "You just couldn't let it go, could you?" she said, her voice echoing down the hall. I froze. She stepped closer. "Don't worry, Stanley," she whispered. "I already knew someone would come snooping. You were always loyal, always predictable." She smiled. "But even loyalty has its price." Then she turned and walked away. No yelling, no threats, just silence. It was more terrifying than any confrontation. I got out, fast, clutching the folder like a lifeline. Back in my apartment, I stared at everything I had. Leon cracked part of the USB, just enough to show this. Project Keystone was a fallback. In plan, a legal document naming me, Stanley Harris, as interim CEO in the event of sudden unethical leadership transition. Jackson knew something might happen. He never trusted Rachel. And now, I held the keys to everything, but she wasn't going to go down without a fight. I remember standing in that cold storage room, gripping the file like it was the last piece of my soul I hadn't lost. My hands shook. My breath caught in my chest. The words burned into the paper like fire. Project Keystone. Interim power of. Attorney Stanley hazed me. I was supposed to lead the company if Jackson passed, but Rachel had buried it, locked it away, lied to the board, lied to the world. She'd not only fired me unjustly, she'd staged a silent coup. I stared at the document for what felt like hours. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in my coat pocket. Something inside me shifted that moment. The shame, the humiliation, the helplessness I'd felt when she fired me, it melted away, replaced by something sharper, focused, purposeful. Revenge? Maybe, but it was more than that. This company had been my life, my purpose, my second home, and Mr. Jackson, he was more than a boss. He was family. I wasn't just going to bring Rachel down for me. I was going to do it for him, for every employee. She'd stepped on for the man who believed in integrity. I made my first move the next morning. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Mitchell Klein, a former investigative journalist turned legal consultant. He owed me a favor. Mitchell, it's Stanley. I need a meeting off the books, somewhere private. He didn't hesitate. Diner on 43rd, back booth, 9 p.m. Bring everything. That night, I wore a hat low over my face and slipped through the diner. A door. Mitchell looked older, more tired, but his eyes were still sharp. Jesus, Stanley, you look like you saw a ghost. Worse, I muttered, sliding the documents across the table. I found something she didn't want anyone to see. His eyebrows rose as he flipped through them. This is a bombshell. If this holds up in court, Rachel's finished. But why didn't Jackson make this public? I looked down. I think he knew she wasn't ready. Maybe he hoped she'd grow into it. Maybe he just wanted a backup plan. Mitchell nodded. You said there's more? I leaned in. He called it Project Keystone. He mentioned something once about a failsafe. Said if anything ever went wrong, Keystone would bring the truth to light. But he never told me what it was. Just that it existed. Mitchell's face tightened. Then we find it, fast. But I wasn't the only one making moves. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from an old co-worker. Heads up, Rachel's asking questions. She knows someone's been digging into archived files. She thinks it's you. My stomach turned cold. The next day, Rachel locked down the digital archives. Then she started wiping records. Anything connected to her father's time at the company, gone. It was like watching someone erase history with a match and gasoline. She even put security guards on night shifts. One of them nearly caught me trying to access the off-site storage unit. I slipped out. Through the maintenance tunnel seconds before he walked in. It was a game of chess now. Every move mattered. I sat in my apartment staring at the old photo I kept on the bookshelf. Mr. Jackson, me, and Rachel. She must have been 17, just a kid. Smiling, wide-eyed, I remembered showing her how the production line worked, teaching her about balance sheets, watching her stumble through her first pitch. One day, Mr. Jackson used to say, she'll be stronger than both of us. I never thought that strength would become something so twisted. She used to ask me questions, back when she cared, used to shadow me around the office. Somewhere along the way, that curiosity turned cold, sharp, ruthless. Did I fail her somehow? Did we both? The next night, I drove to the cemetery. It was raining. I found Mr. Jackson's headstone, quiet and clean. I stood there, coat soaked through, and let the silence settle between us like old friends. You always said you trusted me, that if something ever happened, I'd know what to do. My voice broke. I'm trying. God, I'm trying. But she's not the girl you remember. She's turned this place into a nightmare. I crouched down, fingers brushing the damp earth. You left me the keys to the kingdom, and she changed the locks. But I've got the documents now, and I think there's more. A video, a confession. Project Keystone isn't done revealing itself. I looked up at the sky. I won't let her bury your legacy, not without a fight. 2 days later, Mitchell called. We found something. You need to come now. I met him in the basement of an old office building the company used to lease before the merger. He held up a dusty old server drive. We cracked the encryption on the back end of the company cloud. Hidden partition, encrypted folder, file name, Keystone Final. My heart nearly stopped. Is it a video? He nodded slowly. Yeah, time-stamped a month before Jackson died, but you won't believe what's on it. He plugged the drive into a portable monitor. The screen flickered, and then there he was. Mr. Jackson, alive, clear-eyed, speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this, he said, then Rachel has taken over, and Stanley has found the truth. I froze. You were right, old man, I whispered. Jackson continued, voice steady. There are things you need to know about the company, About Rachel, about what I discovered, before it was too late. Mitchell paused the video. We don't watch the rest. Here, too risky. We move this to an off-site location, make backups, and then we decide how to release it. My heart pounded. This was bigger than I imagined. Rachel didn't just steal a company. She buried her father's final words. She silenced the truth, but not for much longer, because Project Keystone was alive, and I was about to set it free. I stared at the lawyer, stunned. A video confession? He nodded, pushing an old leather envelope across the table. Mr. Jackson recorded it 6 months before his death, called it Project Keystone, said it would protect the company if the wrong person ever took charge. I could hardly breathe. Where is it? The lawyer leaned in. Hidden in the server archives, deep in the basement of the company's main building, password protected. And Stanley, Rachel's trying to purge everything by morning. I left. The diner with my heart pounding like a war drum. It was now or never. Rachel was wiping the slate clean, burying every trace of her father's legacy. That video, it was the only weapon I had left. By 1:42 a.m., I stood outside the building where I'd spent half my life. I knew every hallway, every blind spot, every vent. The security system had changed, but not the bones of the place. My badge was deactivated, but that wouldn't stop me. I had a backup key. Mr. Jackson had given it to me once during a blackout. For emergencies, he'd said. Well, this was one hell of an emergency. The door clicked open with a whisper. I slipped inside, swallowed by the cold blue glow of emergency lights. My shoes made no sound on the polished floors as I crept past the empty cubicles. I could feel the weight of ghosts in the silence, memories of better days. I ducked into the stairwell and headed down, 4 levels beneath the lobby, into the old server vault. Rachel had once called it a graveyard of outdated tech. She'd never cared to look twice. Perfect. As I approached the archive door, I heard something. Footsteps. 2 voices. Security. I flattened myself against the wall. Boss says someone's been snooping, one muttered. It flagged unusual access attempts. My pulse thundered. I counted the steps, then slipped into the archive room as they passed. Rows of humming towers greeted me. Dust-coated consoles. I found the oldest. Terminal in the back corner, exactly where Mr. Jackson used to sit when he needed silence. I entered his old login, still memorized after all these years. Access granted. 1 folder glowed. Project Keystone. I clicked it. The video began to play. Mr. Jackson's face appeared on screen, tired but clear-eyed. If you're watching this, Stanley, something went wrong. I leaned forward, heart in my throat. I trusted Rachel to find her way, but if she's taken over by force or manipulation, know this. She was never meant to run the company. I named you, Stanley. You've always had the integrity, the heart. This is your legacy too. He paused, eyes watering. Rachel's been siphoning funds, forging contracts, planning a buyout using shell companies. I found out too late. But this video and the attached documents are enough to expose her. Do what I couldn't, finish it. I felt everything, grief, rage, and resolve, all crashing over me at once. Footsteps again, they were coming back. I yanked a flash drive from my coat, copied the file, and slipped out the emergency exit with seconds to spare. At dawn, I walked into the office like I still belonged there, because in my heart, I always had. My lawyer and a local reporter followed close behind. Rachel looked up from the executive conference table, surrounded by her boardroom puppets. She blinked in disbelief. Stanley, what the hell are you doing here? Delivering something your father left behind, I said, sliding the laptop onto the table. The video played. The room went silent. Only Mr. Jackson's voice echoed across the glass walls. As he listed Rachel's crimes, faces fell. Her allies turned pale. One of the board members stood up and walked out before it ended. Rachel stammered. This is a fake. He was senile. No, the lawyer cut in. This was verified, time-stamped, and notarized, legal, binding. Effective immediately, Stanley is reinstated as interim CEO. Rachel's voice cracked. You can't do this. You already did, I said coldly. You brought this on yourself. Within 48 hours, Rachel was suspended pending a full investigation. Days later, arrested for fraud and corporate theft. Her assets froze. Her allies vanished. I watched from the sidelines as she was escorted from the building. She tried to rule like a tyrant. She avoided my eyes. But I didn't need her to look at me. The message had already been delivered. The office felt different as I walked through it again, not as a ghost this time, but as someone who belonged. Employees I hadn't seen in months smiled again. Old photos were restored to the walls. Mr. Jackson's name reappeared on the memorial plaque at the entrance. I didn't want the power. I never had. But I took the role not for revenge. At least, not anymore. I did it for the people. For the legacy. For the man who believed in me when no one else did. One afternoon, I sat in Mr. Jackson's old chair, looking out over the city skyline. The sun broke through the clouds. You know, people think revenge is about rage, about destroying the one who wronged you, but that's not always true. Sometimes revenge is quiet. Sometimes it's standing tall when they tried to bury you. Sometimes it's proving that the one detail they overlooked was the one that could bring everything crashing down. She fired me like I was nothing. She erased my name, my work, my legacy. But in the end, she tried to erase me. But I became the one detail she'll never forget.